During a violent storm, a retired German shepherd suddenly rises and stares at his owner's front door. 3 knocks later, a soaked mother and her 7-year-old son ask the former Navy SEAL for shelter. The silent boy avoids every stranger, yet quietly reaches toward the shepherd, waiting several feet away. Then the mother's phone reveals someone is searching for her and wants something her father left behind. By morning, the washed-out road traps them together while her abandoned nursery vehicle exposes their search area. Why would a custody dispute lead back to land the mother never agreed to give away? Stay with this story to the end. Please like and subscribe for more journeys of loyalty and healing. The first thing the storm took from Fox Pine Ridge was the East repeater. 1 second, a green status light held steady on Evan Kincaid's radio console. The next, it went dark. Rain hammered the metal roof of the cabin, and thunder rolled beyond the oak trees. Evan leaned over the desk and keyed the backup channel. At 46, he still moved with the economy of a man trained not to waste motion. His dark hair was cut close, his beard trimmed short, and the sleeves of his camouflage tactical shirt were rolled evenly to his forearms. A broad black field watch sat on his left wrist. 5 years earlier, people had called him a former Navy SEAL, as if the title explained everything. These days, he preferred smaller facts. County radio maintenance, 1 cabin, 1 dog. Quiet. Mac had been asleep near the wood stove. The 8-year-old German shepherd lifted his head before Evan heard anything unusual. Mac's black saddle was dark against the firelight. Tan ran down his chest and legs, and silver had begun to show along the left side of his muzzle. A small notch marked his right ear. He stood and walked to the front door. Evan checked the 2 security screens above the radio cabinet. The cameras had been installed to protect county equipment beside the cabin. One showed the equipment shed under sheets of rain. The other showed an empty gravel drive. "What is it?" Mac did not bark. He stared at the door. 3 knocks came through the storm. Evan opened the inner door, but kept the storm door latched. A woman stood under the porch light with one hand around the shoulder of a small boy. Both were soaked. Mud darkened the woman's jeans to the knee, and wet chestnut hairs had come loose from a low tie. She looked about 35, tired without looking helpless. The boy beside her was 7 at most, narrow-shouldered inside an oversized jacket, with light brown hair stuck to his forehead. "My name is Mara Ellis," she said. "Our car quit below the ridge. We only need somewhere dry until morning." "How far below?" "Not far." Mac came into view behind Evan. The boy's attention locked onto the dog. Evan unlatched the storm door. "Come in." The boy's name was Sam Danner. Evan learned that from Mara because Sam never answered. A canvas pouch hung across his chest. Inside were laminated picture cards held on a ring. "He understands you," Mara said. "Speaking is harder." "How hard?" "Years of therapy. Sounds sometimes. Pieces of words. Nothing clear that stays." Evan nodded without offering pity. Mac took 2 steps toward Sam, stopped, then lowered his body, turned sideways, and lay down several feet away without staring at him. Sam's shoulders dropped. He sat on the floor. For a moment, the quiet between the boy and the dog felt steadier than anything outside. Evan found towels, dry clothes, soup, and bread. Mara tried to refuse the food until Sam touched one of his cards. "Eat." Mara stopped refusing. The cabin changed quickly under the weight of small things. Wet clothes hung near the stove. A child's shoes sat beside Evan's combat boots. A second bowl appeared on the drying rack, then a third. The only room with 2 sleeping surfaces was the narrow room at the back of the hall. Evan had not opened it for a guest in 5 years. The room still held a cedar sewing box and a yellow curtain Rachel had chosen, because, she used to say, Gray rooms needed one thing that refused to be gray. Evan's wife had been dead 5 years after a road accident. Since then, the room had stayed closed. Mara stopped behind him. "We can sleep out here." "No. You don't have to give up. It's a room." He folded a blanket over the bed and pulled a camp mattress from the closet. "One night," he said. Mara nodded. One night. Her phone vibrated while she helped Sam into dry clothes. The weak signal had downloaded several messages at once. Mara tried to silence it, but a voicemail opened under her thumb. A man's voice filled the room. "If you think this is only about Sam now, you still don't understand what your father left." Mara killed the message. Evan stood at the counter. He had heard it. "His name is Trent," she said. "My ex-husband. We're divorced. Sam lives with me. Trent has visitation." "Any order saying you can't leave the county?" "No." "Anything giving him the right to take Sam tonight?" "No." Mara wrapped both hands around a mug. "He says he can take me back to family court. Says he can make me look unstable. Says a judge will believe I can't manage Sam." "Can he?" Her eyes lifted. "He can try." Evan did not ask what her father had left. People told the truth in the order they could manage. Thunder cracked close enough to shake a window. Sam folded inward at the table, hands pressing against the sides of his head. Mac rose. Instead of going to the door, the shepherd crossed the room and settled beneath the far end of the table, close to Sam, but not touching him. Sam looked down. Slowly, he lowered one hand. His fingers stopped above Mac's shoulder. Mac stayed still. Sam touched the tan fur near the dog's neck with 2 fingers. Mac exhaled and rested his chin on his paws. Mara closed her eyes for a second. Evan turned toward the stove because something in his chest had tightened without permission. After Mara and Sam went to the back room, Evan checked the generator, the radio battery, and the front lock. Then he checked the lock again. His hand stayed on the deadbolt. He was not afraid of the strangers sleeping down the hall. That was the problem. For the first time since Rachel died, there was a child inside the cabin, and Evan had caught himself thinking about whether the door would hold if someone came looking for him. He slept badly. By morning, the storm had weakened to steady rain. Evan pulled on his brown combat boots, clipped a leash to Mac's worn leather collar, and followed the access road downhill. Mara had said the car was close. It took almost 20 minutes to reach it. The Ellis Nursery and Seed station wagon sat near a ditch, mud across the doors. One rear tire sunk into soft ground. From there, the cabin was nearly 2 miles uphill. Evan looked back toward the ridge. 2 miles. With a 7-year-old. In that storm. When he returned, Mara stood on the porch. Sam sat just inside with Mac's rubber ball beside his shoe. "You said the car was close," Evan said. "I know." "Why walk that far?" Mara watched rain drip from the roof before looking at him. "Because if Trent found the car first, I didn't want us still inside it." A county road crew called over the radio before Evan could ask more. A large oak was down across the lower road, and runoff had damaged the culvert near the bend. The road might not be safe for normal traffic for 2 or 3 days. Evan ended the call. One night had become something else. Mara's phone buzzed on the kitchen table. 17 missed calls, all from Trent. A new voicemail waited. Mara played only the beginning. "Mara, I know you took the nursery wagon out of Redfern." She stopped it. Evan looked toward the blocked road below. Trent did not know about the cabin yet, but he was already looking. By the second morning, the cabin had begun developing habits that did not belong to Evan. Mara found flour in the back of a cupboard and made skillet biscuits with the last of his butter. Sam arranged his picture cards along the table in careful rows. Mac stopped lifting his head every time Mara crossed the kitchen and started sleeping through the smaller sounds of another family moving around him. Evan noticed all of it, while pretending to care more about the weather report coming through the radio. The road crew had cleared one lane below Fox Pine Ridge, but the damaged culvert still made ordinary traffic unsafe. County operations asked Evan to reach a repeater station near the lower road and bring one backup unit online. It was close enough to walk part way, then catch a ride with the maintenance crew. Before leaving, Evan checked the radio battery, the outer camera feed, and the weather map. He did not check whether Mara planned to leave. That bothered him. Near the door, Rachel's old yellow raincoat still hung from a wooden peg. The color had faded at the shoulders. Mara had hung her own brown canvas jacket on the opposite side without touching it. Evan noticed that too. Mac followed him to the porch, then stopped when Evan gave a small hand signal. "Stay." The shepherd looked back toward Sam. Sam was standing several feet away with the dog card in one hand. Mac sat. Evan left him there. The lower ridge was louder than the cabin. Chainsaws worked through fallen branches. A county truck idled beside orange cones. 2 volunteer rescuers carried bottled water toward a crew digging debris from a drainage ditch. The storm had pulled people out of their usual lives and put them beside one another in wet boots. Evan preferred machines. Machines did not ask questions unless something was wrong. People asked questions because they were curious. Cal Morton, a road crew foreman with a gray beard and suspenders over a reflective jacket, met Evan beside the repeater box. "Power board got wet." "Connector housing failed." Cal handed him a flashlight. "You hear about the Ellis woman?" Evan kept his eyes on the cabinet. "What about her?" "Left the nursery, took her boy. Folks say her ex is looking for them." Evan tightened one terminal screw. Cal continued because silence had never stopped him before. "Heard the business is in trouble. Money trouble." "Who told you?" Cal shrugged. "Different people." That answer was worse than a name. A delivery driver standing near the county truck glanced over. "Trent Danner came through yesterday, asking if anyone had seen the nursery wagon. Said he was worried about his son." Evan looked at him then. "Did anyone tell him anything?" "Not from me." Cal wiped rain from his beard. He sounded reasonable enough. That sentence stayed with Evan longer than it should have. By noon, the repeater was transmitting again. Evan rode back toward the upper road in a county truck and watched the scattered signs of Redfern County pass through the window. A bait shop with plywood over one broken pane. A volunteer fire station with trucks parked outside. A small building supply yard where men were stacking wet lumber under tarps. Nothing dramatic. That was what made the rumor dangerous. It was already moving through ordinary places. When Evan returned to the cabin, Mara was at the sink. Sam sat on the rug with Mac several feet away. Evan removed his wet jacket. "People are talking." Mara stopped washing a bowl. "About what?" "You leaving the nursery, taking Sam. Money problems." Her shoulders went rigid. "Did Trent say where we are?" "No one I spoke to knows." She turned off the water. "That won't last." Evan looked toward Sam before lowering his voice. "You have the custody paperwork?" Mara dried her hands and went to the canvas bag she had kept near her since arriving. She pulled out a folded copy sealed inside a clear plastic sleeve. Evan read only what mattered. Mara had primary physical custody. Trent had scheduled visitation. There was no restriction preventing temporary travel within the state or county line. But there was an upcoming visitation date. "You'll miss this." "I know. He can use that." "I know that too." There was frustration in her answer, but most of it was aimed inward. Evan handed the paper back. "He can complain about it. That doesn't mean he gets to walk in here and take Sam." Mara gave a tired laugh with no humor in it. "You say that like paper behaves the same way in every room." Evan waited. She sat at the table. Trent was good at making things look reasonable. That was the first time she told him more than the minimum, not all at once. She gave him pieces while Sam worked with his cards nearby. Trent had taken over the household accounts because Mara was busy with Sam's appointments. Then he had taken over the nursery books because her father's health was failing. Bills went to Trent. Passwords went through Trent. When therapy schedules changed, he called the clinic himself. He called it helping, Mara said. What did you call it? For a long time? Helping. Her fingers tightened around the edge of the table. Then I started asking questions. That's when I became difficult. Evan said nothing. He would say I forgot things, that I got overwhelmed, that I didn't understand business. If I disagreed, he'd explain it slower. She looked toward Sam. He never needed to shout much. That told Evan more than a list of arguments would have. Ellis Nursery and Seed had belonged to Mara's father, nearly 20 acres, some under greenhouse cover, some used for native trees and shoreline restoration stock. After the divorce, the ownership stayed with Mara. Trent had worked in its finances long enough that she had spent months removing his access, or thought she had. I changed the bank passwords, she said. Email, payroll. I don't know what else he had. Evan saw the thought arrive before she spoke it. Maybe Trent knew exactly how uncertain she was. Across the room, Sam held up the dog card. Mac raised his head. Evan walked over and crouched beside Sam. He knows hand signals. Sam watched him carefully. Evan lifted one hand, palm angled downward, and gave a simple motion. Mac lowered himself to the rug. Sam's eyes widened. Evan repeated the motion slowly. Sam copied it. Mac stayed down. Sam looked at Mara. Then he made the signal again. Mac did not change position. A smile appeared on Sam's face, small but immediate. The boy tried it a third time. Same signal. Same response. Evan understood why it mattered. No hidden rule. No correction after the fact. No adult deciding that the answer had changed because the mood had changed. Sam had done one thing. The world had answered the same way 3 times. Mara looked away for a moment. Later that afternoon, she used Evan's landline to call Darla Quinn. Darla had kept the nursery books for almost 15 years. Mara spoke warmly at first, asking about the employees, the storm damage, and whether the lower greenhouse had leaked. Then she asked about the accounts. Darla became quiet. Mara straightened. What? Evan was across the room checking a weather sensor but could hear only Mara's side. How bad? Another silence. When was what transferred? Mara stood. No, I didn't authorize that. She listened. Then her expression changed again. Not fear this time. Confusion. When was the last time I looked at the operating account myself? Evan stopped working. Mara closed her eyes. I don't know. Darla spoke long enough that Mara sat down. Then came the question that changed the room. No, I never gave Trent permission to negotiate the east parcel after the divorce. Sam looked up. Mac did too. Mara pressed the receiver tighter against her ear. Darla? Silence. Then Mara said, Why? She listened again. Her face went pale. All right. A pause. No. If you don't want to say it on the phone, don't. When the call ended, Mara kept holding the receiver. What did she say? Evan asked. She said she needs to show me something. What? She wouldn't say. Mara stared at the wall. She sounded scared. That evening she went through the canvas bag again, looking for old account information. She found the vehicle registration for the nursery wagon. Then she froze. Fleet service. Evan looked over. Trent used to manage the roadside assistance account for all the nursery vehicles. You cancel his access. I changed the financial accounts. I don't remember changing that one. The county contractor had already logged the abandoned wagon for eventual towing. If the fleet system still recognized Trent as an administrator, it would not give him Evan's address. But it could give him the service area, Fox Pine Ridge Road. Mara lowered herself into a chair. He doesn't know this cabin. Not yet. Evan did not like the words after he said them. That night, Mara called Rebecca Sloan, a 52-year-old local attorney who had handled civil work for Mara's father years earlier. Rebecca's voice came through the speaker clean and unsentimental. Save every voicemail. Delete nothing. Do not argue with Trent in writing. Send one short message confirming Sam was safe. Follow the existing custody order as closely as circumstances allowed. Sign nothing involving the nursery or land. If this becomes a financial fraud issue, Rebecca said, I send it where it belongs. I'm not going to pretend I practice every kind of law because you're scared. Mara almost smiled. That sounds like you. It should. The next morning, county operations reported that one lane would be open to normal vehicles by afternoon. Mara could finally leave. Evan found her standing beside the kitchen table with her coat on and the canvas bag over one shoulder. For a moment, he thought she was going farther away. Instead, she looked at him. I want to go back to the nursery. Evan glanced at Sam, then at Mac. Mara had spent days measuring distance from Trent. Now, for the first time, she was choosing a direction based on something other than escape. By the time Mara stepped through the front gate of Ellis Nursery and Seed, 3 people had already stopped what they were doing to watch her. The storm had left the property wet and battered, but standing. Plastic sheeting snapped over one greenhouse where 2 roof panels had come loose. Puddles filled the gravel lanes between rows of young maples, dogwoods, fruit trees, and native shrubs. A forklift moved slowly near the loading shed, while 2 workers restacked bags of soil that had been moved away from a leaking wall. Mara knew every corner of the place. Her father had taught her to drive an old nursery cart here before she was tall enough to see comfortably over the steering wheel. Yet that morning, she felt like someone returning to a house after strangers had rearranged the furniture. Evan waited beside his truck outside the office building. He had driven her down from Fox Pine Ridge after the county opened one lane. Sam had stayed at the cabin with June Talbot, a 62-year-old retired school aide who had lived near Mara before the divorce and was one of the few adults Sam accepted without a long adjustment. Mac had remained there too, at Evan's suggestion. Sam had looked disappointed when Evan took the truck keys, then relaxed when Mac settled beside his chair. Before Mara closed the passenger door, Evan said, I can come in. She looked toward the office windows. Do you think I should? Evan rested one forearm on the open truck door. I think you should decide. No lesson. No challenge. Just the choice. Mara closed the door. Stay here. Evan nodded. All right. Rebecca Sloan knew where Mara was. Deputy Tessa Ruiz, 43, had also been notified after Rebecca advised Mara to create a clear record of when and why she returned to her own business. Tessa had met them briefly at the gate, a compact woman with dark hair pulled low beneath her county cap and the patient expression of someone who disliked both drama and missing facts. She confirmed Trent was not on the property, reminded Mara to call if that changed, then left for another storm-related call. Mara walked in alone. Darla Quinn came through the office door before Mara reached the steps. At 56, Darla had the solid build of someone who spent half her time behind a desk and the other half carrying boxes because nobody else had noticed they needed moving. Her short brown hair was streaked with gray, and reading glasses hung from a cord against her flannel shirt. For 1 second, neither woman spoke. Then Darla hugged her. You scared 10 years off me. I didn't know I still had 10 to spare. Darla pulled back. You look terrible. Thank you. That was not criticism. The ordinary bluntness almost broke something open in Mara. Instead, she looked past Darla toward the yard. A propagation worker raised one hand in greeting. Another employee pretended not to see her. Before Mara could ask why, Luis Ortega, who managed the loading yard, approached with a clipboard under one arm. Glad you're here, he said. Then his expression tightened. Are we closing? Mara stared at him. What? At the end of the month? We're not closing. Luis looked genuinely confused. Trent said the numbers weren't working. A delivery driver waiting near the loading bay heard them and called over. What about Stonewater? Mara turned. What about Stonewater? The driver hesitated. I heard they were taking the east side. The nursery seemed to go strangely quiet, even though the forklift continued beeping behind them. No one is taking the east side, Myra said. The driver lifted both hands. I'm just telling you what I heard. Mara looked across the property toward the eastern acreage, where rows of young river birch descended toward a wooded boundary. Beyond those trees, the land eventually dropped toward the lake. Her father had refused 3 offers for that portion before he died. Trent had always called that sentimental. Mara had called it his. Then hers. Inside the accounting office, Darla shut the door. That's why I didn't want to talk on the phone. She placed 6 months of printed ledgers on the table. The first numbers looked ordinary. Payroll, fertilizer, fuel, heating costs, storm preparation. Then Darla marked a series of payments with yellow tabs. Hartwell Field Logistics, LLC. Mara read the amounts. What did they haul? That's the problem. Darla opened a second binder containing delivery and receiving records. The invoices described repeated transport of nursery stock, native trees, shoreline grasses, fruit saplings. Enough product to require multiple trucks over several months. Luis had no matching outbound records. Darla had asked 2 crew leaders. Neither remembered the loads. There could be paperwork missing, Mara said. There could. Or subcontracting I didn't know about. There could. Mara looked at her. You don't believe either. Darla shook her head. The amounts increased as the months passed. Not enough to destroy the nursery in a week. Enough to make cash flow tighter, bills harder to meet. And every bad month looked like proof of poor management. Mara heard Trent's voice without wanting to. You get overwhelmed by numbers. For years, she had taken that sentence as a description. Now she wondered if it had been preparation. Darla pulled one more sheet from a folder. This was left in the copier tray 3 months ago. I kept it because I didn't understand why it was here. It was not a deed. It was a draft access and option agreement referring to the eastern parcel of Ellis Nursery and a proposed development called Stonewater Landing. The language concerned potential usage of a corridor across nursery property to reach land closer to the lake. Mara read the paragraph naming Trent, authorized representative for family property interests. She read it twice. I never authorized him. I know. No power of attorney. Nothing. I know. Mara put the paper down carefully. The question had changed. Yesterday she had wondered whether Trent was moving money. Now somebody outside the nursery had apparently been told he had authority over land that was not his. How far did this go? Darla's face tightened. I don't know. That answer frightened Mara more than a dramatic one would have. When she returned to Fox Pine Ridge, she carried copies of the ledgers and agreement in her canvas bag. She did not immediately tell Evan what she had found. She sat on the front step while late afternoon water dripped from the pines. Evan came outside and set a mug beside her. He stayed 1 step lower. I don't know which part of my business is real anymore, Mara said. Don't figure out all of it tonight. She gave him a tired look. That sounds easy from here. It isn't. What do I pick then? One thing you know. Mara looked through the open door. Sam sat on the floor with Mac's worn rubber ball between both hands. The nursery is mine. Evan nodded once. For the first time, she noticed she had said it without mentioning Trent. The next afternoon, Evan was repairing a portable radio at the workbench, while Mara folded laundry near the stove. Sam sat several feet away from Mac, holding the rubber ball. He lifted it. Mac watched him. Sam made a small sound. Mara's hand stopped. Sam tried again. His mouth worked carefully around the sound. Ma. Mara almost supplied the word. Evan looked at her and gave the smallest shake of his head. Don't help him. Give him room. Evan turned back to the radio. Mara looked down at the towel in her hands. Nobody waited on Sam. Nobody asked him to perform. Mac. The word was soft and uneven. But it was a word. Evan's screwdriver stopped. Mac stood, crossed the floor, and placed his chin on Sam's knee. Sam's hand disappeared into the thick fur along the dog's neck. Mara turned toward the window. Her shoulders moved once. Evan looked down at the open radio because happiness had entered the room so quietly he had not prepared a defense against it. Rachel had once wanted children. They had kept postponing the conversation. One more deployment. One more year. A better time. Then time had made the decision for them. Evan had spent 5 years making sure it never got the chance again. Now, a boy who did not belong to him had spoken the name of his dog before any other clear word. The feeling in Evan's chest was warm, then frightening. The following morning, Mac rose from beside the stove before anyone heard the engine. His head turned toward the road. Seconds later came the low climb of a truck working its way up Fox Pine Ridge. Mara reached the window first. A black pickup came through the trees. She stopped breathing for a moment. Evan saw her face and stood. You know it? Mara did not take her eyes from the road. Yes. The truck kept coming. Trent. The black pickup stopped 30 yards below the cabin. For several seconds, nobody moved. Mara stood at the window with one hand pressed flat against the sill. Sam was on the rug behind her, Mac beside him. Evan watched the truck door open, and a man step out wearing a dark quilted jacket over a clean collared shirt, jeans without mud on the cuffs, and polished brown boots that looked wrong on a road still scarred by the storm. Trent Danner did not hurry. That was the first thing Evan noticed. The second was that he looked down the hill before walking up. County crews were still clearing branches near the lower bend. A contractor's utility truck sat beside the ditch. 2 residents had stopped to talk near a temporary road marker. Trent knew he had an audience. Mara whispered, "He does this." "What?" "Looks calm first." Evan opened the front door and stepped onto the porch. Trent stopped below the steps. "Mr. Kincaid, Evan is fine. Trent Danner." "I know." Trent gave a small smile as if Evan had passed a test. "Then I assume Mara told you some version of what's happening." "She told me enough." "I doubt that, sir." The word sir carried no respect. It was there for anyone close enough to hear it. Trent looked toward the cabin window. "I came for my son." Evan remained beside the porch post. "Do you have a new court order authorizing you to take him today?" Trent's smile weakened. "I have visitation rights. That wasn't my question. My son has been removed from his home during a storm and brought to an isolated cabin with a man my ex-wife barely knows." "Do you have an order?" "No." "Then we can call Deputy Ruiz and wait for her." Trent's eyes changed for half a second. Then he smiled again. "You probably don't realize Mara has been under a lot of pressure." The door opened behind Evan. Mara stepped outside but stayed near the threshold. Trent's attention moved past Evan immediately. "Mara." She did not answer. "I've been trying to reach you." "I know. You missed my weekend. Sam is safe." "That's not your decision alone." Mara's hand trembled once at her side. Evan saw it, but he did not move toward her. Trent did. One step. Evan shifted just enough to keep himself between Trent and the doorway. Trent stopped. Then his voice changed direction. He no longer spoke to Mara. He spoke about her. "She left the nursery in the middle of financial problems. She took Sam without telling me where she was going. She's staying in a cabin with a stranger. My son needs stability, and I'm trying to provide it." One of the workers below the road had stopped moving brush. Mara heard the same thing Evan did. Trent was building a version for witnesses. "You told people I'm closing the nursery," Mara said. "I told people what the numbers show. You told people Stonewater was taking the east parcel. That's a business matter." "It's my business." Trent's jaw tightened. Mara's voice was not loud, but it held. "You don't speak for me anymore." Trent looked at Evan. There it was again. The shift. "She's upset." Mara flinched, as if the sentence had touched an old bruise no one could see. Then she straightened. "Sam isn't going with you." Trent stared at her. "I'm not going with you either." The quiet after that lasted less than 2 seconds. It was enough. Something in Trent's face changed. The careful concern disappeared. He stepped toward Mara. Evan moved into the gap. "Stop there." Trent shoved at Evan's chest. Evan absorbed the contact and stepped back once. "Don't." Trent came forward again. This time, Evan moved. There was no fight in the way people later described it. No exchange of punches. Evan turned away from the line of Trent's charge, controlled one arm, shifted his weight, and brought him down beside the porch where the ground was flat. Trent struggled. Evan held him there. Nothing more. Inside the cabin, Sam had gone still. Evan did not look away from Trent. "Place." Mac moved immediately. The German Shepherd did not rush the door or bark at Trent. He crossed the room and lay sideways between Sam and the entrance, his large body forming a quiet line across the floor. Sam sat behind him and buried both hands in the fur around Mac's shoulders. Mac stayed. Down the hill, someone shouted. A phone came up. The recording began too late. It captured 12 seconds. Trent on the ground. Evan controlling his arm. Mara saying, "Stop! Just stop!" The porch railing blocked the doorway, so Sam could not be seen clearly. Mac was outside the frame entirely. The video did not show Trent stepping toward Mara. It did not show the shove. It did not show the second rush. It showed only the part people were most likely to understand incorrectly. Sirens arrived 8 minutes later. Deputy Tessa Ruiz came up the road with another officer. Evan released Trent as soon as she ordered it. He stepped back and kept both hands visible. Tessa looked from Trent to Evan to Mara. "Nobody talks over anybody," she said. "Mr. Danner, over there. Mr. Kincaid, stay here. Mara, inside until I come to you." Trent started to speak. Tessa raised one hand. "I meant everybody." The second officer took Trent downhill. Tessa listened to Evan without expression. He gave her the sequence. No military history. No explanation of what he could have done. No claim that Trent deserved worse. Only what happened. When Tessa entered the cabin, Mac was still lying across the same section of floor. Sam had not moved far from him. That seemed to matter to her. By evening, Trent was gone. The 12-second video was not. It appeared first in a Redfern County community group with the caption, "Something happened at Kincaid's place." By midnight, another person had reposted it. "Former SEAL restrains father trying to see son." The next morning, Evan's supervisor called. "We're not suspending you," the man said. "But until the sheriff finishes the incident review, no solo remote site calls." Evan looked at the radio bench. "For how long?" "I don't know." "That's useful. I'm trying to keep this administrative." "I know." After the call, Mara received one from Luisht. A landscaping contractor had postponed a large nursery order. Another employee wanted to know whether Trent was right about the business. Mara ended the call and stood in the kitchen staring at nothing. Sam still used his cards. Water. Outside. Dog. But he did not try to say Mac again. Mara noticed. Evan did too. Neither mentioned it. Mac continued exactly as before. He lay near Sam when Sam wanted him near. He moved away when the boy needed space. Nothing in the dog's behavior suggested that one difficult afternoon had changed the rules. Evan wished people worked that way. Late that afternoon, he took a box down from the utility closet and began sorting through spare blankets, an unused camp stove, and the address book he kept for emergencies. Mara watched him from the doorway. "What are you doing?" "June might know somewhere closer to town. Rebecca probably does too." "For us?" "Yes." "Why?" Evan kept folding a blanket. "This place just became part of your problem." "No. My work is under review. People are talking. Sam saw enough yesterday." Mara looked toward the living room where Mac was asleep beside the boy. "You think we made your life worse?" Evan did not answer. That was answer enough. Mara went to the back room. 10 minutes later, she came out carrying the canvas bag. Evan stopped. For one brief, unpleasant moment, the cabin seemed to prepare itself to become quiet again. Mara put the bag on the kitchen table. She added the copied ledgers, the Stonewater document, her keys, and a notebook. Then she pulled on her brown work jacket. "I'm not leaving." Evan looked at the bag. "What are you doing?" "Going back to the nursery tomorrow." "Mara, I have spent years making every decision around what Trent might do next." Her voice shook, but it did not break. "He came here because I ran. He stood in your yard and told strangers who I was. Now 12 seconds of your life belong to people who weren't here." She picked up the nursery keys. "I'm done letting him go first." Evan looked toward Sam. Mara followed his gaze. "I'm not asking you to fight him." "Good. I'm asking you not to decide for me that leaving is safer." That landed harder than Trent's shove had. Evan slowly put the blanket back in the box. That evening, Rebecca Sloan came up to the cabin after reviewing the copies Mara had brought from the nursery. She spread them across the kitchen table, but did not begin with Trent, custody, or the video. She tapped one line on the ledger. "Hartwell Field Logistics, LLC. Stop trying to prove Trent is a bad man," she said. Mara looked at her. Rebecca tapped the number again. "Prove where the money went." Deputy Tessa Ruiz parked where she could see both the nursery office and the road. That was the point of the civil standby. She was not there to search anything, decide who owned what, or stand over Mara while she opened drawers. Rebecca Sloan wanted the next step to be boring enough to survive scrutiny later. "Get what belongs to you," Rebecca had told Mara. "Photograph where you found it. Don't argue with Trent if he appears." Evan drove Mara to Ellis Nursery, but stayed outside the office. Darla was waiting with 3 binders, a laptop, and the strained look of someone who had spent the night deciding whether fear was still useful. Inside, Mara did not start with Trent. She started with dates. They laid the operating ledger beside receiving logs, delivery manifests, bank statements, and vendor invoices. Hartwell Field Logistics appeared 23 times in 6 months. The first charges were small enough to hide among fuel and seasonal hauling. Then they grew. Mara traced one invoice. 400 shoreline saplings. Darla opened the warehouse log. Nothing left that day. Another invoice claimed 2 truckloads of fruit trees. No truck numbers, no signed release, no matching reduction in inventory. Luis Ortega came in from the loading yard and studied the dates. He remembered one legitimate Hartwell delivery years earlier. None of these. Could Trent have told someone to skip the paperwork? Mara asked. He could, Luis said, but the trees would still be gone. They were not. By noon, the pattern had stopped looking like bad bookkeeping. Some invoices had been entered using a login that belonged to Trent before Mara removed him from the banking system. The credential should have been disabled. It had not been. For years, Trent had told her the nursery was too complicated to understand in pieces. If she could not understand all of it, she should let him manage it. Now, one piece at a time was exactly how she could see it. Rebecca arrived after lunch and reviewed what they had documented. She did not call it fraud. Not yet. We preserve it. We ask who received the money. We let the people with authority make that conclusion. What can you do? Family court, protective order, civil preservation. If this crosses into fraud or forgery, I send it where it belongs. Mara glanced through the office window. Evan stood beside his truck speaking with Tessa, keeping the distance Mara had asked for. The next document was harder. Rebecca had noticed the notary block on the Stonewater Access draft. The name belonged to Walter Boone, 63, who ran a print and copy shop near the courthouse and had served as a notary for years. Walter remembered Trent before Rebecca finished explaining. He brought me something like this, Walter said. Wanted a signature notarized for Mara. Was she present? No. What did you do? Told him no. Mara placed Darla's photocopy on the counter. Walter studied it. That's my name. He leaned closer. That is not my seal. He pulled his notary journal from a locked drawer and found the date range. No entry for Mara. No entry for the agreement. I never notarized this. Rebecca photographed the journal and asked Walter to write down what he remembered. Outside, Mara stopped on the sidewalk. So now we know. Rebecca shook her head. We know Walter says he did not notarize that copy. We still don't know who altered it, who submitted it, or whether another version exists. Every answer seemed to come with another door. Stonewater Landing answered through counsel the following day. Rebecca had not accused the developer of wrongdoing. She had simply notified them that Mara disputed Trent's authority and requested preservation of communications. Their response changed the shape of the problem. Stonewater had not purchased Mara's land. Title had not transferred. No final access right had been recorded. But the company had paid a conditional option and access fee after Trent represented that he could negotiate family property interests. The amount was large enough to matter. Where did it go? Mara asked. Not to the nursery, Rebecca said. Records showed part of the payment had gone to an account associated with a small business entity linked to Trent. Further tracing required formal investigation. There was also a deadline. If Trent could not produce valid access, the fee could become repayable. Mara sat very still. The pieces shifted. Trent had not only wanted control after the divorce, he needed something from her. Authority, a signature, time. And Sam had been the strongest pressure point he had. Rebecca kept her grounded. Motive is not evidence by itself. I know. For the first time, Mara did. That afternoon, Rebecca met Evan at the cabin about the porch incident. Tessa joined them because the sheriff's review was still open. Anything else recorded that day? Rebecca asked. Evan looked toward the equipment cabinet, then stopped. The security system. Tessa turned. You have cameras. 2. County equipment security, continuous local recording. He had checked the live feed the night Mara arrived. After Trent came, he had been too occupied with statements, Sam and the fallout to think about the recorder. They pulled the footage. The fixed camera showed Trent walking up, Evan staying on the porch, Mara telling Trent no. Trent closing the distance, the first shove, the second movement forward. Then Evan turned, controlled the arm, and brought Trent down. No punch, no kick. Mac never approached him. When Tessa arrived, Evan released immediately. The 12-second phone video had not been false. It had simply begun after the part that explained it. "This changes the review," Tessa said. The county saw the footage the next morning and removed Evan's solo site restriction after completing its internal report. Cal Morton called before lunch. "I owe you one." "You owe me a working culvert." Cal laughed once, then stopped. I shared the clip. Evan said nothing. I shouldn't have. No. There was no dramatic reconciliation. Cal apologized. Evan accepted it. Neither pretended the damage vanished with the correction. At the cabin, Sam had begun giving Mac signals again. Wait. Mac stayed. "Come." Mac crossed the rug. Down. Mac lowered himself. Sam did not say the dog's name every time. Some days he only shaped the first sound and stopped. Nobody pushed. What had changed was not speech. It was initiative. Sam was beginning to ask the world for something and expect an answer. Mara watched him, then looked at the nursery keys beside her papers. For weeks her question had been, "What is Trent doing to me?" Now another had taken its place. What do I need to do to take back what is mine? Tessa called just before dinner. Stonewater had produced additional communications for the investigator, reviewing the financial records. "There's an email you need to know about," she said. "From Trent?" "Yes." "What does it say?" Tessa read the relevant line. "Mara will sign when the family matter is resolved." Mara looked across the room at Sam, his hand raised in a wait signal while Mac watched him. The sentence did not prove everything, but for the first time, the land deal and the custody pressure were no longer two separate stories. The land use hearing was held in a county meeting room that smelled faintly of floor cleaner, wet coats, and old paper. Mara noticed the chairs first. 4 rows facing a long table, all of them exposed. No back corner where a person could disappear without being seen. In Chapter 1, she had walked through a storm hoping no one would find her. Now she stood in the doorway while people turned to look. Rebecca Sloan touched her elbow once. "You don't have to answer more than what's asked." "I know." "You don't have to prove what kind of person Trent is." "I know." Rebecca studied her. "Good. Because today is about access." That distinction mattered. The hearing was not a criminal trial. Nobody in the room could decide whether Trent had committed fraud or forgery. The board had one question. Could Stonewater Landing rely on the access rights Trent had represented as available through Ellis nursery property? Everything else was moving separately. An investigator was reviewing the Hartwell payments, electronic login records, the disputed notary material, and Stonewater communications. Rebecca had already filed for protective conditions in family court. Trent's visitation with Sam was being handled under a temporary arrangement, while those issues were reviewed. 3 systems, 3 different jobs. Mara needed that separation, because Trent had spent years making everything feel like one problem with his name at the center. He arrived 10 minutes later with an attorney. He wore a navy coat over a gray sweater and greeted 2 county staff members by name. His voice carried the same careful warmth he had used at the cabin before he lost control. Sam noticed him before Mara did. The boy's fingers tightened around the ring of picture cards in his lap. Mac, lying beneath Evan's chair, lifted his head. Evan did not touch the dog. He looked at Mara. She looked back. Not yet. The meeting began. A Stonewater representative explained the preliminary project. No buildings were being approved that day. No land was changing hands. The company had been working from documents indicating a potential access corridor through the eastern section of Ellis Nursery. Then Trent's attorney spoke. The words were careful, because careful words could carry ugly things farther. Mara had allowed Trent to manage business accounts during their marriage. True. Mara had left the nursery abruptly. True. Mara had missed a scheduled visitation after taking Sam away. True. Mara had remained with a man she had known only a short time. True. The nursery had experienced cash flow problems under her ownership. Also true. Trent sat with his hands folded and did not look at her. For a moment, Mara understood exactly why she had doubted herself for so long. Truth could be rearranged without technically becoming a lie. Rebecca asked Mara only a few questions. Did you authorize Trent to negotiate access across the eastern parcel after the divorce? No. Did you sign the agreement submitted in connection with Stonewater? No. Did you give him power of attorney over Ellis Nursery property? No. Did you receive the option payment? No. Then Darla Quinn explained the accounts, not dramatically. She described invoice dates, amounts, receiving records, warehouse logs, and the old Trent credential that should have been disabled. She did not claim to know who created every false entry. I know what the books say, Darla told the board. I also know what left the yard. Those two things do not match. Walter Boone came next. He looked uncomfortable in a clean shirt and tie that seemed to make him distrust his own neck. The board chair showed him the disputed notary block. Is that your name? Yes. Your seal? No. Did you notarize this document? No. Have you ever seen Mr. Danner regarding a similar document? Walter nodded. He came to my shop. Ms. Ellis was not with him. I refused. Nothing about the statement was dramatic. That made it stronger. The Stonewater representative then confirmed that Trent had presented himself as able to negotiate family property interests. Stonewater had paid a conditional option and access fee based on that representation. The transaction had never closed. Title had never moved. Legal access had never been finally recorded. The room shifted again, not because of one revelation, because independent people who had not coordinated their stories kept describing pieces that fit together. When the investigator summarized the records reviewed so far, he was careful not to overstate anything. Payments connected to the option fee had gone through an account linked to Trent. Electronic logs showed access to nursery systems from credentials historically assigned to him. Communications indicated pressure from Mara's signature as the access deadline approached. Then Rebecca introduced the email Stonewater had preserved. One sentence was read into the record. Mara will sign when the family matter is resolved. Trent finally looked at her. Mara did not look away. His attorney tried to restore the old shape of the story. Ms. Ellis was under considerable strain. Mr. Danner was attempting to stabilize both the family and the business. Her decisions during that period, including leaving with the child and relocating to Mr. Kincaid's isolated residence, must be understood in that context. Trent leaned toward his attorney, then spoke before Rebecca could object. She is only standing here because Kincaid. Mara turned toward him. I'm standing here on my own feet. She did not raise her voice. The room went quiet anyway. For once, Trent had tried to define her in public and failed before finishing the sentence. Sam began rubbing the edge of one communication card against his thumb. Evan saw it. Mac saw it too. The dog shifted closer beneath the chair, but Sam's breathing remained shallow. Evan looked toward Mara. No words. She nodded. Evan stood, took Sam's coat, and quietly led him into the hallway. Mac followed on a loose leash. The door closed behind them. Sam sat on a wooden bench and flipped through his cards until he found one. "Wait." He held it toward Evan. Evan sat beside him. "Yeah," he said. "We wait." Mac lay across their feet. Evan could hear voices through the meeting room door. For most of his adult life, waiting outside the room while someone else handled danger would have felt like failure. Now Sam leaned lightly against his arm, Mac's warm body against their boots, and Evan understood that going back inside would help no one. Mara did not need him to win the room. She needed him not to take it from her. The board returned to its narrow question after another hour. Stonewater Landing had not established a valid access right through Ellis Nursery property. The portion of the preliminary approval dependent on that access was suspended until proper documentation could be produced. No one declared Trent guilty. No one needed to. That part belonged elsewhere. By the end of the week, the investigation had advanced far enough for authorities to take formal action on the financial and document issues supported by the evidence. Rebecca also obtained temporary protective conditions, limiting Trent's direct contact with Mara, while family court adjusted his visitation with Sam, pending further review. The law did not erase him from their lives in one afternoon. It placed boundaries where Mara had once been forced to create them alone. The town corrected itself more slowly. One man from the road crew came to Evan at the base station and apologized for sharing the 12-second clip. Another simply said, "Should have asked before I decided what I saw." Some people still watched Evan differently. He learned he could live with that. That evening, after Mara and Sam were asleep, Evan opened the wooden box he had kept on the highest shelf of his bedroom closet. Rachel's things had survived 5 years by not being touched. A photograph, 3 birthday cards, a faded scarf, a blue-gray ceramic bowl with one small chip near the rim. He carried the bowl to the kitchen. Mara appeared in the hallway before he could put it down. She looked at the bowl, then at him. Rachel liked keeping apples in this. Mara did not say she was sorry. She did not tell him Rachel would want him to move on. She only said, "Then we need apples." Evan set the bowl in the center of the table. The next afternoon, an investigator called with a question about the security footage. Evan stepped toward the porch and called Mac from habit. "Mac." The shepherd looked at him, then looked at Sam beside the table and Mara near the sink. He did not move. Evan called once more, then stopped. Mac was not refusing. He was waiting to know which responsibility mattered. Evan looked at the 3 of them. "Stay." Mac lowered himself beside Sam. Evan stepped outside alone. For the first time in years, being alone for a few minutes did not feel like returning to the life he understood. It felt like leaving a room he expected to come back to. A week later, Mara stood in the kitchen holding a contractor's estimate. "The little house behind the nursery should be ready in a few weeks." Evan kept his eyes on the radio component in his hands. "Good." Only one word. Mara heard what was missing from it. So did he. By early spring, Ellis Nursery and Seed had stopped looking like a business recovering from someone else's decisions and started looking like Mara's. The change was not dramatic. There was no new sign over the gate and no speech to the employees. It showed up in smaller things. Every account password had been replaced. Purchases above a set amount required 2 approvals. Mara spent Tuesday mornings beside Darla, learning reports Trent had once told her were too complicated to explain. She called vendors herself. She corrected invoices. She made mistakes, found them, and fixed them without anyone using the mistake as proof that she should surrender the next decision. The investigation into Trent's financial conduct continued through the proper channels. Temporary court orders remained in place, limiting direct contact with Mara and adjusting visitation with Sam while the family matter was reviewed. Stonewater Landing had not disappeared. Its planners began exploring another access route that did not depend on Ella's property. Life had refused to arrange itself into winners and losers as neatly as a storybook might have. Mara preferred it that way. The nursery needed customers more than revenge. On a clear Saturday in April, employees and county volunteers gathered near the lake for a shoreline restoration day. Ellis Nursery supplied native grasses, young river birches, and several hundred shrubs grown for wet ground. Tessa Ruiz arrived out of uniform carrying work gloves. Luis drove the flatbed. Darla stood beside a folding table with clipboards and behaved as if improperly counted saplings were a threat to civilization. Evan came with Sam and Mac. Mac's muzzle had more silver in it now. Cold mornings made his rear legs stiff for the first few steps, so Evan no longer hurried him. The shepherd still carried himself with the same working dignity, only slower. Sam wore his communication cards across his chest. Speech therapy had continued. Some days he produced several clear sounds. Other days, very little. Mac remained the spoken word that returned most reliably. Nobody kept score. Evan spent the morning planting shrubs beside Cal Morton, the road foreman who had once shared the 12-second video. For 20 minutes they talked only about soil. Then Cal pushed his shovel into the ground and said, "I watched 12 seconds and figured I knew the whole thing." Evan tamped dirt around a young serviceberry. "I've done that to people." Cal looked surprised. Evan shrugged. "Doesn't make either of us right." That was all. They went back to work. Across the restoration site, Mara was explaining planting depth to 2 volunteers. She wore an old canvas jacket, work gloves, and mud on one knee. She no longer looked toward Evan every time the vehicle entered the parking area. He noticed that. He also noticed she still looked for him sometimes, when nothing was wrong. That mattered more. 3 weeks later, the small house behind the nursery was ready. It had 2 bedrooms, a narrow porch, and a kitchen window facing the propagation greenhouse. Mara had chosen the paint herself. Sam chose where his desk went by carrying his picture cards into the smaller bedroom and placing home on the windowsill. Evan helped move boxes. He did not ask whether they were certain. He installed one loose shelf, carried a mattress upstairs, and left before dinner because Mara needed the first night there to belong to her and Sam. Back at Fox Pine Ridge, Evan opened the room where they had slept. The camp mattress was gone. The yellow curtain Rachel had chosen still hung beside the window. Sam had left one small pencil beneath the bed. Evan picked it up. The cabin was quiet again. He stood there long enough to recognize what he had spent 5 years refusing to name. This was not peace. Peace did not ache when someone left a pencil behind. He had called isolation peaceful because admitting he was afraid of losing another person would have required him to admit he still wanted one. Evan put the pencil on the windowsill and left the door open. Mara did not move back to the cabin. That was important. She called him from the nursery when she did not need anything. Sometimes she brought Sam up for dinner. Sometimes Evan went down and helped Luis repair an irrigation pump. Mara argued with him once about where he had stored fertilizer bags and won because it was her nursery. Evan found himself smiling about that while driving home. One evening, Mara arrived carrying a wooden basket of apples. She walked into the kitchen, saw Rachel's blue-gray ceramic bowl in the center of the table, and emptied the apples into it. No question. No ceremony. Red and green root settled against the small chip in the rim. Past and present occupied the same piece of furniture without asking either one to leave. Later, while Evan put soup on the stove, Mara looked at the dining table. "Why is that chair always empty?" Evan followed her eyes. The chair opposite his usual place had been empty so long he had stopped seeing it. After Rachel died, he had rarely eaten at the table. He ate at the counter, beside the radio bench, sometimes standing at the sink. Even after Mara and Sam arrived, habit kept leaving one chair slightly farther back than the rest. He put down the spoon. "I don't know." Mara waited. Evan did. Then he understood that the answer was not complicated enough to hide behind. He pulled the chair out. "Sit." Mara looked at him for a second. Then she sat. Nothing changed outside. No storm broke. No music filled the cabin. Evan went back to the soup, but the chair stayed occupied through dinner. A month later, Evan began building a lower step beneath the front porch. Mac could still climb the original one, but some mornings he paused before doing it. Evan had watched that hesitation twice before admitting what it meant. Sam sat beside him on the porch with a small container of screws. "Short one," Evan said. Sam studied the container and handed him the correct screw. "Good." Mac lay in the shade near Evan's boots. Sam scratched gently behind the dog's notched right ear. Mara was inside checking an order sheet from the nursery. Through the screen door came the sound of paper turning and a pot settling onto the stove. No one was in danger. No one was watching the road. No one needed evidence. Evan tightened the first board. Sam looked at him. Evan pointed to the container. Another. Sam did not move. His mouth opened. A small sound came out, then stopped. Evan knew better than to turn the moment into a test. He went back to the screw. Sam tried again. Mac lifted his head. Evan kept his eyes on the wood. Then Sam said it. "Dad." The screwdriver stopped. The word was quieter than the drill had been, quieter than wind in the trees, quieter than Mac's collar shifting when the old dog sat up. Evan heard nothing else. Mara stood behind the screen door with one hand against the frame. She did not say, "Say it again." She did not ask whether everyone had heard. Sam watched Evan. Evan put the screwdriver down and lowered himself until they were level. For several seconds, the man who had known what to say under fire, over radios, beside wrecked equipment and inside rooms, where decisions had seconds attached to them, had nothing. Then he nodded. "Yeah, buddy." Sam waited. Evan swallowed. "I'm here." Mac put his head across Evan's boot. The moment did not erase Rachel. That surprised Evan less than it once would have. Rachel was still the woman who had laughed at his inability to choose curtains and filled a gray cabin with one yellow thing because she believed rooms needed courage too. Loving Sam did not push her farther away. Loving Mara did not ask him to rewrite the years that came before them. For 5 years, Evan had believed that if he never opened his life again, life could not take anything else. He finally understood the bargain. Isolation had never protected him from loss. It had only made loss the room he lived in. That evening, Mara sat at the table reviewing nursery orders. Sam drew on the floor beside Mac. The old shepherd slept on his new cushion near the stove after refusing the porch step twice, simply because he could. Rachel's bowl held Mara's apples. Evan carried dinner from the kitchen. 1 plate for Mara, 1 for Sam, 1 for himself. Then Mac's bowl beside the stove. Years ago, everything in this cabin had been measured for 1 man and 1 dog. Evan looked at the table and realized he had stopped counting. Outside, the porch light burned above Foxpine Ridge, not because anyone was lost in a storm, not because someone might need shelter before morning. It stayed on because there were people who knew the road home. Sometimes healing does not mean leaving the people we lost behind. It means carrying their love forward, without letting grief close every door that still remains. Evan learned that opening his heart to Mara and Sam did not diminish what Rachel had meant to him. It simply allowed the life she once shared with him to keep growing in a new direction. In our own lives, Peace may begin just as quietly, with an open chair, a porch, light left on, or the courage to let someone matter again. If this story stayed with you, please share your thoughts, leave a comment, and subscribe for more stories about loyalty, hope, and second chances. May you find peace with what has been lost, and courage for whatever good may still be waiting ahead. If you have any feelings, thoughts, or suggestions about this story, would you share them in the comments below so we can listen, learn, and keep making these stories better?